In this subsection dealing with traffic lights, we're going to have a look at the dangers that can arise when a traffic light turns to amber or to orange. How do I know when a traffic light does turn to amber, whether to go or whether to stop? This question is answered on the website on the page dealing with traffic lights. So go and have a look at that. However, we are going to cover some factors to take into account when making such a decision. Firstly, what is our proximity, in other words, our distance to the intersection? The closer we are to the intersection, obviously the less time we have to respond in order to slow down, as opposed to being further from the intersection and having the time then to be able to slow down safely. What is our speed when approaching the intersection? The higher the speed, well, the less chance we have of being able to slow down in time. Are there vehicles behind us so that if we do slow down and brake fairly harshly, there's a chance that we're going to be rear-ended by any vehicles behind us? What is the viewing angle that we have of the intersection? So if we have a look at this satellite image, we can see the driver of the red vehicle doesn't have much of a viewing angle of any vehicles that would be to the side of the intersection here or even approaching the intersection. So what is our viewing angle of the entire intersection so that we can see either the presence or the movement of vehicles surrounding the intersection? What is the road surface like? Is it wet conditions so that the road is wet, which means that there's less chance we'll be able to slow down safely and perhaps even the vehicle being induced into a slide so that we slide into the intersection? Maybe there's some gravel on the road surface which would have that same outcome of us now sliding into the intersection if we try and slow down or brake. Are there other vehicles that are in the intersection already? So if there's a vehicle in the intersection waiting to turn left here, for example, and we coming down this side of the intersection, well, we'll have less time to be able to respond if the driver suddenly decides that he is going to proceed through the intersection. So if there are already vehicles in the intersection, we've got to be even more cautious. What about pedestrians? If it's turned amber, are there pedestrians waiting on the side and there's a chance that they're going to want to try and cross the intersection without really taking note of any approaching traffic? And so that's important to take into account. And so the biggest factor and the biggest piece of advice I can give you when approaching intersections, be it an intersection that either contains traffic lights or not, but whenever you approach an intersection, always try to slow down. Now, this would be dependent on whether there are vehicles behind you, so you don't want to irritate or impede the speed of vehicles behind you, and as we said, maybe stand a chance of being rear-ended. So you've got to take that into account. But where at all possible, wherever and whenever you approach an intersection, try and slow down. What I normally do when I approach an intersection, and I can do this easily because I've got a stick shift or a manual transmission, is that I push my foot on the clutch. So in other words, I put the car into neutral and I freewheel through the intersection. At the same time, hovering my other foot over the brake, just in case something does arise in the intersection, then I can respond almost immediately because my foot's hovering over the brake. Not pushing on the brake, not touching the brake, but just hovering over the brake. And that saves that fraction of a second time in having now to take your foot off the accelerator and put it on the brake. So that's something that I always do when I go through an intersection. Let's have a look at a number of different scenarios now by means of the animations and the real life clips to see how different situations can arise when a traffic light turns to amber. In the first animation, we see that each of the vehicles is now approaching the intersection from opposite sides. And so this traffic light pertains to the red vehicle, this traffic light to the green vehicle. As it turns amber for both vehicles, Note that the driver of the red vehicle is much closer to the intersection than the driver of the green vehicle. So the driver of the red vehicle may assume now, because he's closer, he can go through the intersection, and that the driver of the green vehicle, because he's more of a distance from the intersection, is going to slow down and come to a stop. But one of the biggest mistakes we can make, especially when it comes to amber traffic lights, is to assume what other drivers are going to do. We've got to try and predict the worst case scenario. So in this animation, the driver then of the red vehicle goes ahead thinking that the driver of the green vehicle is going to stop, but he goes ahead, and so we have a collision within the intersection. In this real life clip, we've got this driver that's wanting to turn through the intersection. The traffic light now goes amber at this point. So he thinks, because the vehicle alongside him has stopped and it's still amber, that it's safe for him now to turn through the intersection. But his situation's a little bit more complicated by these vehicles that's blocking his view of any oncoming traffic. So he should be even more cautious and not just assume that there's no traffic coming along. He turns. The driver of the vehicle approaching from the opposite side also likewise can't see him, as he was stuck behind these other vehicles, thinks it's safe now to quickly try and make a dash across the intersection on the amber, and so we have the collision in the intersection. In the next animation, we've got the driver of the red vehicle approaching the intersection at a fair speed. His viewing angle is limited to be able to see a vehicle waiting on the side of the intersection, and it's a fancier car, speedier car, so he's just waiting now for the traffic light to turn green, and immediately on turning green, he's going to proceed through the intersection, which doesn't allow the driver of the red vehicle that time to make it through the intersection. So just be cautious of this scenario where you can't really see other vehicles in the intersection. So here we've got this driver approaching fairly quickly. The driver waiting in the side road here is waiting for the traffic light to turn green immediately, and he takes off. Whereas this driver thinks now it's safe to try and make it through the intersection on amber. Turns amber, he's still going. He's already starting to take off. Perhaps he's even had a look, instead of the green light on the opposite side, waiting for the traffic at right angles to him to come to a stop, because he's looking at the amber that would be presented to them. And so we have the collision. He tries to make it through the amber light. He takes off immediately on green, and so they collide. In this animation, what we've got is something similar to the previous animation, excepting that whereas in the previous animation we had the vehicle on the side here waiting for the traffic light to turn green, here instead we've got a vehicle in motion. So what happens in this scenario, and this is also a very common scenario, is that the driver of the vehicle in the side road is trying to time his movement to coincide with the traffic light going green. And so he tries to catch it immediately as it goes green. The driver of the red vehicle tries to beat the amber light, and so because of that combination of driving, they'll end up colliding in the intersection. So he tried to make it through the amber. He timed his movement to catch the traffic light on green, and this is the end result. So here we've got the camera approaching the intersection. We've got a vehicle on the side here just waiting immediately for either his traffic light to go green, or perhaps he's looking at the traffic light that determines what the traffic from the side should do. So either he's waiting for it to go green or the side road to go amber, and then he takes off immediately. In the meantime, the camera tries to make it through on amber, and so they collide in the center, as was depicted in the animation just prior to this. In this animation, what we have here are 4 vehicles approaching the intersection, these 2 waiting to turn within the intersection. And let's just run it a little bit. Goes amber. The driver of the blue vehicle sees that there's an approaching white vehicle, observes that the white vehicle is very close to the intersection at the time it turns amber, so he knows there's a good chance this vehicle is going to continue through the intersection, so waits for the white vehicle. Whereas on the other side, the driver of the green vehicle sees that the driver of the red vehicle is quite a distance from the intersection, so assumes that this driver is now going to slow down and come to a stop. So there we go. The white vehicle goes through, the blue vehicle waits for the white vehicle. The driver of the green vehicle thinks it's safe to go because now at this stage it's already turned red, but the driver of the red vehicle, because of his speed, thinks that it's still safe for him to cross. Whether this was either amber or red, he's traveling too fast to be able to slow down, and so as they proceed, both collide through the intersection. Now, this is also a very common scenario. What you're seeing here happens frequently. So what we have is the camera entering the intersection, waiting to turn left. We've got a line of vehicles also waiting at the intersection. Any vehicles on the far side is not visible to the camera. And so he's got to be ultra cautious because he can't see beyond these vehicles to see if there's any approaching vehicles. He enters into the intersection, slows down, waiting for any vehicles to come through because the traffic light would be green for them and he can't see them. Starts turning across, notices that the traffic light's gone amber, and so now assumes if there are any vehicles on the far side, they're going to come to a stop because of the amber, and proceeds across the intersection. A vehicle that is approaching down the far side likewise can't see the camera because of these intervening vehicles, thinks that he's going to try and beat the amber light, continues through the intersection, and they collide. In this next animation, what we find happens here, and this is also something that occurs fairly frequently, and that is where one's got a line of traffic waiting to turn through the intersection. Now we can see the driver of the green vehicles at a fair distance from the intersection at this point, and notices that there are vehicles that are turning through the intersection here. Now these drivers, the traffic light is green, so any line of traffic here, it's safe for them to proceed, or they have the right of way to proceed, provided there are no other vehicles close by the intersection. But what happens in this scenario is that a driver who approaches the intersection on amber just assumes that it's safe to go because the driver ahead of him has gone through the intersection. So let's run it. So at this point, the traffic lights have gone amber. This driver was already close to the intersection, so proceeds through the intersection, still safe for him to do so because the green vehicle's still a fair distance, so he can make it safely through the intersection. The driver of the red vehicle thinks that it's safe for him to go, doesn't really take note of the traffic lights, just assumes because the driver ahead of him is free to go, that he now can also continue through the intersection, and because of that assumption, we have the collision in the intersection. So where you're approaching an intersection, as we can see from the camera's perspective here, and you see that there's a line of vehicles turning through the intersection, then beware that when you get closer, there may be a driver in that line of traffic who thinks it's safe to go because all the vehicles ahead of him proceeded through the intersection. So just be cautious of that. At this point, the traffic light has turned to amber. Now this driver thinks that it's safe for him to go because all the drivers ahead of him have gone. Doesn't really take note of the traffic light, turns across the path of the camera. And fortunately, in this case, no incident, but you can see it's very close. So just be cautious of that scenario. In the next scenario, we have something that could be very confusing, because we would assume that traffic lights facing each of the drivers on the opposite sides would coincide with one another. So when this turns green, that turns green. When this turns amber, that turns amber. When this turns red, then that turns red. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the traffic lights aren't quite in sync because they're designed to try and handle that specific type of intersection and the traffic flow. So yeah, we've got green for the driver of the green vehicle, and yeah, we've got red for the driver of the red vehicle. And so we've got a misunderstanding that happens within this traffic circle, because what happens is that the driver of the red vehicle sees that the driver of the green vehicle is coming along and now assumes that his traffic light is red. So because he sees that it's red for him, he assumes that for the other driver, this is going to be red as well. And so thinks it's safe because he's close to the intersection to proceed through the intersection. But because of his assumption, we have the collision in the center. So be careful, because the traffic lights aren't always synchronized as far as their colors go. And yeah, we've got a situation which is exactly that. The camera proceeds up to the intersection. He sees it's amber, so thinks that this line of vehicles is going to come to a stop because it'll be amber for them as well. So after this vehicle passes, thinks that it's safe to go through. But for this line of traffic, it could well be that it's a green light for them, so they're safe to go ahead, and that the camera should actually stop. But he thinks now, because they'd be presented with amber, that they're going to stop. That's not the case. Cuts across that vehicle, and fortunately not a collision. In the next animation, what we have here, vehicles approaching the intersection. Now the driver of the green vehicle waits for the yellow vehicle to proceed, because this vehicle was very close to the intersection at the time the traffic light turned amber. Thinks that the driver behind him, because he was a bit of a further distance at the time it turned amber, is going to stop. Just assumes that, goes ahead. But the driver of the red vehicle tries to beat the amber light, and here we have a collision. So that's what we were saying at the outset. If you're traveling and approaching the intersection and there are already vehicles within the intersection, rather be careful and slow down, and preferably stop in that case. The driver of the yellow vehicle ahead sees that the traffic light has turned amber, assumes that the oncoming traffic has seen amber for them, and that it's safe to cross. But that's not the case. One of the oncoming drivers tries to beat the yellow or the amber or the orange traffic light, and we have that collision.
Please like, subscribe, and get notified.